Hello everyone, welcome to episode 10 of 360 Anything Goes. Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. And on this week's episode, I'm going to be talking about, for the first time, the Simpsons here on Anything Goes. Going to be talking about the episode The Old Man and the Lisa, which is pretty much a Mr. Burns and Lisa episode, but there is a reason that this is the episode this week I am talking about here on Anything Goes, and I will get to that in just a little bit. But first, just a reminder, last week, in case you missed the last episode of Anything Goes, I talked about Chucky the series, which last Wednesday night, was the season premiere of season 3 of Chucky. And I DVR'd, like I said last week, since it airs Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. while AEW Dynamite is on, I have to DVR it. But this week, I will not have to DVR it. Actually, since AEW Dynamite is airing on a special Tuesday night this week, going head-to-head against NXT, and I'll talk more about that on 360 Wrestling Fanatic, so keep up with everything going on there. So I'll be watching Chucky when it first airs this week, and so go, if you're able to, go back and listen to last week's episode of Anything Goes, all about Chucky the series. Also leave in the comments if you are a fan of Chucky the series, and who's your favorite character on the show. Also, you can go ahead and say what your favorite maybe Chucky movie is. Which one is your favorite in the comment section, either right here on Spreaker or YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast at. So now let's get into this week's episode of 360 Anything Goes. And The Simpsons is something I definitely wanted to talk about here on the podcast eventually. And the reason I'm talking about The Simpsons this week is because tomorrow, Friday the 13th, Bret the Hitman Hart will be here in Wayne, Michigan, doing a special benefit show for kids who have autism at, I believe it's called Hype Athletics. Will be taking place tomorrow night, Howe Road, here in Wayne, Michigan. Bret the Hitman Hart, WWE Hall of Famer, will be doing a meet and greet before the show. Also appearing on the show tomorrow night is Impact Wrestling's Motor City Machine Guns. Zach Cowan will be appearing. Rhino, and I want to say Juntai GQ Gavin Quinn appearing on the show tomorrow night. So if you're here in the Michigan area, try to make it out to Wayne at Hype Athletics, I believe. I'm sure you can look online, find out more info. It's for a good cause. Definitely worth checking out. And now, on to the Simpsons. First, real quick, I just want to mention that I actually wasn't watching the Simpsons regularly at this time. I might have seen 1-2 episodes at the time. I'm not sure. But I remember when I was little, actually, that I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons. But now it kind of seems silly because with some of the other cartoons that are out now, South Park, Family Guy, Simpsons seem like nothing. And the reason, though, I definitely watched this episode, though, was because of Bret the Hitman Hart would be on it. And I even remember at this time I had a subscription to WWF magazine, and on the cover was Bret Hart and Bart on the cover, and Bret, his usual gear and everything, and then Bart was dressed in Bret Hart's gear. And I remember the headline on the cover said the Bart Foundation. That is definitely one of my favorite all-time issues of WWF magazine. I wish I still had it. So if anybody has a copy and wants to send it to me, if you don't mind, let me know in the comment section, or you can email 360wrestlingpodcasts@gmail.com if you have a copy of it. And let's get into this episode, The Old Man and the Lisa, from Season 8, Episode 21. But first, actually, I want to get in. I know I keep delaying it, but I want to get into a couple of podcasts that I listen to about The Simpsons. I know there's quite a few, actually, but there are 2 I listen to every week. I'd say the best one is The Simpsons Show, hosted by Robbie and Matt. Their new episodes come out every Sunday night. I'd say I haven't listened to every Simpsons podcast out there, but out of the ones that I have listened to, I'd say that is the best one. I listen to every week, every new episode that comes out. Very good if you're a Simpsons fan and a fan of podcasts. I definitely recommend checking them out. Like I said, every Sunday night they have a new episode. You can check out their website, thesimpsonsshow.com. You can listen to every episode there. And they even got a list of the best episode ever list, where they rank each episode as they talk about them. So, very good podcast. The Simpsons Show with Robbie and Matt. Definitely recommend that. The other Simpsons podcast I listen to every week is the 138th Simpsons podcast. And they have a thing called the Wheel of Random where they talk about from episode 138 and beyond. But once a new season starts, like a couple weeks ago, the new season just started, so they're going to talk about the new episodes that just aired. And then when there's not a new episode, like I said, they'll do the Wheel of Random and talk about one of the older episodes. Very good podcast as well. So if you're a Simpsons fan and want to listen to a good Simpsons podcast, I definitely recommend that you listen to those two right there. And there are definitely other Simpsons podcasts out there. I just haven't listened to too many of them. I know there's Talking Simpsons, and there's one called The Doe Show, which I haven't listened to. Also, I want to say there's one called The Four Finger Discount. That is also another Simpsons podcast. And now let's get into this episode. It first aired April 20th, 1997. Like I said, I first heard about this because of WWF. Bret Hart was going to be on, so of course they promoted that. And they had that WWF magazine that I mentioned a little bit ago. So I definitely made sure to watch this episode. The Old Man and the Lisa, which, like I said, this one was pretty much a Mr. Burns and Lisa episode. And the couch gag on this episode where the couch becomes a giant whack-a-mole game and Homer gets hit. And the episode was directed by Mark Kirkland and written by John Swartzwelder. And in this one, Lisa collects recyclables to earn money for the Junior Achievers Club school trip to Albany. And Mr. Burns speaks to the club. And he gets a little upset here when Lisa suggests that the power plant starts a recycling program. And then Burns ends up losing his money. And then his mansion ends up getting sold to Bret Hart, which I have heard about this before, is that actually the reason Bret Hart sounds a little different in this one, doesn't really sound like him, like his normal self, is because originally he was supposed to play just a generic wrestler, I believe, and that's why he kind of doesn't really talk like himself. He says, "Ew, old man stink," or something like that about the house. And then, of course, I think it's Lindsay Nagel says he's not the only wrestler in town. I think it's the Screaming Sheik that lives down the street. And that is Bret Hart's involvement in this episode. He's not really a huge part of it. Just kind of like a small appearance. But I still thought at the time that it was pretty neat. And sometimes I still watch that episode, and the rest of it, I think, with Mr. Burns and Lisa is pretty good in this one too. And there is a famous scene in this episode where Mr. Burns goes to the supermarket by himself and he's confused between ketchup and catsup. He has the two bottles and he's looking at both of them back and forth. Ketchup, catsup, ketchup, catsup. He doesn't know which one to get. So, like I said, that's a pretty famous scene from this episode. And eventually, Mr. Burns starts to recycle. And then he ends up selling the recycling plant to the fish stick company for $120 million. And he offers Lisa 10%, but she rips up the check. And that causes Homer to actually have 4 heart attacks. And then at the hospital, Lisa apologizes for forfeiting the money. And he tells her that $12,000 would have been a godsend. And Lisa says that 10% of $120 million is actually $12 million. And then another one, Code Blue there, another heart attack. So that was the Simpsons episode, the old man and the Lisa. And I thought this one was a pretty good one. I thought. And not just because of Bret Hart either. Because he was just in it for a small part anyway. But like I said, I thought the story between Mr. Burns and Lisa was pretty good in this one. And the whole ketchup and catsup scene was in this one as well, which I thought was pretty funny. And if for some reason you have not seen this episode before, I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm sure that it's on Disney Plus. If you have Disney Plus, I'm sure it's probably on there. Also, if you have FXX, when they show the Simpsons, I haven't watched FXX in quite a while, but I know they used to show the Simpsons about 5 days a week. And I want to say they may have changed the schedule up a little bit the last couple of years or so. I'm not quite sure. Like I said, I do not get FXX on Sling, so I haven't really been able to keep up. But they used to, and they do show that one. So I definitely recommend checking that one out. And as I mentioned earlier, the 2 Simpsons podcasts, The Simpsons Show and the 138th Simpsons podcast, they definitely do a better job of talking about The Simpsons than I do. So I definitely recommend that you check them out. And any other Simpsons podcasts, if you are a fan of The Simpsons, I'm sure there's some other really good ones online too. And that is all for this episode of 360 Anything Goes, episode 10. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And Hopefully we'll be back with a new episode next week, episode 11. As of right now, I have no idea what I will be talking about. But there are definitely quite a few things that I want to talk about on future episodes. I want to talk about Bonanza, the Rifleman, maybe another episode of Full House, maybe another episode of The Simpsons, maybe some more Chucky, who knows, or maybe I'll do another Anything Goes episode of Anything Goes where I just talk about anything that pops into my head. And that is all for episode 10. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this episode talking about the Simpsons, the old man, and the Lisa. Until next week, I'll be right here to talk about, like I said, I'm not sure yet. Whatever I decide to talk about, I'll talk about, and hope all of you will join me here for the next episode, episode 11. But until then, see you later, alligator.